Hola,
Hola,
pues
bienvenidas, bienvenidos.
Buenas.
Bueno, hola. Bueno, bienvenidas y bienvenidas a todos. Es un gusto estar hoy recibiéndolos a todos para conversar un poquito y seguir profundizando en estos temas que tanto nos interesan sobre la internacionalización de las marcas y cómo acceder específicamente al mercado de Estados Unidos. Como ya saben, hoy vamos a estar charlando con Matilda Calaveggi. Estoy hablando en español porque ella sabe español, pero es la única parte de esta actividad que va a ser en español. Después empezamos en inglés, pero no se preocupen porque también está Jacinta Schwartz, que es asistente de Matilda, que es chilena, y entonces ella va a poder como traducir un poquito en el caso de que lo veamos, sintamos necesario. Eh, pero igual cualquier cosa, digo, nos vamos manejando entre todos. Eh, bueno, como ya saben, Matilda es parte de Mana Fashion, que es un grupo con base en Miami están trabajando en un showroom, organizando un showroom que tiene base ahí y también brindan servicios para las marcas. En este caso, además, bueno, ella tiene mucha experiencia, tiene más de 18 años de experiencia como consultora de manera más privada y también como trabajando como buyer para otras marcas, entonces conoce muy de cerca todo el negocio wholesale de las marcas de moda. El plan de hoy es hablar un poquito más de la entrada al mercado americano de manera específica. Em, y bueno, la dinámica, o sea, invitamos a todos a que interrumpan, a que participen, pueden levantar la mano. La idea es que conversemos, es que esto sea es una actividad fluida y dinámica, y que se saquen todas las dudas, que de verdad aprovechen porque para eso estamos en esta actividad. ¿Tá? Así que adelante.
hola, hola, hola a todos. My name is Matilda Calaveshi. Thank you for the introduction, Elisa. So what are we doing today? So today we're going to talk a little bit about entering into the US market. As Elisa said, I have about 18, 19 years of experience in retail, kind of bringing brands into the US market. Whether I was a buyer or now director of brands for Mana Fashion, my goal is to create the wholesale or establish the wholesale business in Miami. So for brands like yours that are ready to come to the US, we want you to come to the US through the wholesale model where you have buyers placing big orders from you, not someone that you're selling a shirt to or a pair of pants to, because that doesn't really make or break your business, right? So in order for you to succeed abroad is you have to have these big contracts with buyers. You have to have purchase orders that are meaningful, that can bring you the return you need. So we're going to have 4 webinars. This is the first one, and each webinar is going to tackle one of the pillars of entering into the US. Today's webinar is going to be fairly basic. So it's how do we initially get through the process of entering in the US. Then we're going to talk about wholesale separately. We're going to talk about pricing separately. We're going to talk about branding separately, so that we kind of have a little bit of an overall understanding of what it takes to establish ourselves in the US. So I'll start my presentation, but as Elisa said, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'm more than happy to help you. If you're not comfortable in English, we can do Spanish. Jacinta is here. I understand it, but I don't speak it with your accent. So if you have trouble understanding me, we have the queen. Jacinta can, she's very, very capable and well-versed in all of this. So together we're here for you today, okay? So we're gonna take the time to go over this slowly and that we're all kind of on the same page. So the only thing is when I share my screen, I cannot see who raises their hand. So if Elisa, you can help me and read questions for me because I don't have access to the screen that way. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So what do we know about the US retail market as it stands right now? So it's one of the largest in the world and one of the most dynamic. So it's characterized by different sectors. We have brick and mortar, then we have the e-commerce. So when we're talking about retail, the US is one of the markets you want to capture because it has a lot of volume. So volume for you means money, right? And you want a market that has a lot of volume because that's how you can monetize your business. So by numbers, it's a $4.3 trillion investment into our GDP. It employs over 32 million people. Direct labor is 1.3 trillion. So, and these are kind of top level numbers, but these are numbers that I'm just putting visually in front of you so you understand that there's a lot of potential in the US market, right? I come from a smaller country in Europe, and no matter how good you were in my country, you were limited to 3 million people. Now, if you get really great in the US, the opportunities are enormous. So how do we capture that, right? When we're looking at retail, the top global players as it stands right now are Walmart, and this is global, so around the world. Walmart, Amazon, the Schwarz Group, Aldi's, Costco, those are the top 5, right? Now, this is a slide only to help you understand that globally, this is what is being fed. But this is only the top 5. The opportunities for us to tap into these retailers are there. So if you have a great brand, if you have a successful brand, depending on the price point, you can tackle a Walmart, you can tackle an Amazon, again, if it makes business sense for you. But the opportunities are enormous and there are many. As of right now, we also need to understand the US consumer. So the US consumer has changed a lot in the last 10 years. So this slide gives us an idea of where the money is being spent in retail. So if you look at this, 2022, 2023, a lot of consumers are spending their money in discount retailers, okay? So what does that mean? That our consumer right now in the US is very price conscious. They worry about money, they're kind of paying attention to where they're spending their money. Then mass market has grown a little bit. What hasn't grown is electronics. Thankfully, we're talking about retail, fashion retail here, so that doesn't really affect us. So footwear and apparel has seen a decline too. Off-price has seen a bit of a decline, home improvement, sporting goods, and so on. So and this is 2022, 2023, 2024 numbers are not ready yet. But when we're looking to see how we're going to enter the market, I urge you to check the trends of where the money is being spent in the US market, because it also tells you if it's a good time to enter the market or not. And it also depends a lot on price points. So if we see that the top one, if we see that discount retailers have grown 26%, then the number one takeaway from all of this chart is that the consumer is conscious with their price point. So if we're entering the market at a higher price point, we have to be very smart where we go, because we already know that there's not a lot of disposable income to spend. So the ones that are going to spend the money, we have to make sure we have the right product for them. So our retail sectors in the US, we have grocery and food, which is one of the largest. So you have the Walmart, Kroger, Costco, you have apparel. And the apparel has shifted a lot to like athleisure. We have now in the US a strong focus on sustainability. The way we're purchasing and consuming apparel right now is in a more conscious lens. So we're paying attention to labels, if it's sustainable, if it's recyclable, and so on, if it's ethically produced. So what I see is from a lot of the smaller countries, they have that as a good add-on. Most of them are sustainable, most of them are ethical, and these really resonate with the US consumer. So if you fall into that area, that's a plus for you, because that's how the US consumer is shifting and they're becoming more sustainable and ethical. Then we have electronics and appliances and home improvement. Again, those are not part of our conversation today. Now, e-commerce represents about 20 to 20%, 22% of retail sales. So you have obviously the Amazons of the world dominating the space, but there's also others that are available. So we also have that consumer that's tech savvy, that's willing to spend the money. So let's say you are a brand from Uruguay entering the US market. Would you do it from a direct to consumer perspective? Meaning you don't open a store physical, but you ship to all of your consumers online. Maybe that's one way to enter the US market. And we're going to talk about what that entails. But it's good to see that like e-com numbers are increasing. So that tells us that maybe as a Uruguayan brand, I don't need to come in the US and open a physical store. Maybe what I need to do is have a presence online and serve the consumer online, because that's kind of where the trend is going in terms of how money is being spent. Online retail continues to grow. Again, our shopping of the US consumer currently is very seamless. We can find something on our phone, we can go on our computer and order it, or we can find it on our computer and then we can order it on our phone. Or so you have to create that seamless experience from when they find you on Instagram to your website to how they pay. It's funny, I read a fact that if it takes more than 3 steps to submit payment online, the consumers just stop. So we also have to create a seamless paying experience. You don't want them to think twice. You want them to press a button, and that's it. The transaction is done. You take the money, you deliver the goods. The more time you give them to think about it, doubt themselves, then that return rate kind of declines a lot. So let's keep that in mind. The challenges that we have in the US right now are many. One is labor shortage. It's very tough to find workers in the US, especially in the field, meaning in stores and so on. Supply chain issues have become an issue after the pandemic. So I'm going to talk about your supply chain and how you need to reinforce that. And then obviously inflation, but that's everywhere, right? Most countries around the world have seen inflation increase after pandemic. So that's kind of an overall
I
statement.
Before we go in, I would like to add in the past slide that it's important to know that the minimum salary per hour in Florida is $12 the hour, and it's going to be increased in one more year to $15. So approximately, like a person who working at Target, for example, they earn $20 per hour. So it's important when you want to hire someone to know this kind of things. In that way, you can really find someone who wants to work with you.
Yeah, thank you for
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So then you also understand how much money you have to allocate to people you're employing when you're doing your numbers. So current trends in the US, we love the omni-channel experience. So omni-channel retailing. So as I said, the seamless experience between online, offline, buy in store, buy online, pick up in store, all of that. So we have a very spoiled consumer in the US. They want everything. They want the best of everything at the best price, at the quickest time. They want it all, right? So we have to keep that in mind when we're entering the US market. Another trend we see is sustainability. There's an increasing demand for environmentally friendly products, transparent supply chains. So how do we fit into that? And then the third one is technology and personalization. Again, we want to feel like we are being catered to as a consumer. So how do you use the data and analytics and AI to offer a personalized shopping experience when they log in, the recommendations they get, the emails they get, so on and so forth. So doing business in the US, I kind of split it into 5 sections. So number one is you have to figure out why the US, right? And I'm going to kind of go through the rest of them. So the first thing I have my clients do is go through this and realize whether what you have in your hands, it's a hobby or if it's a business. So what's a hobby? We do it for pleasure. We don't care about money. We engage or we work on it when we have time. It's a passion. You might have people that pay for it, you might not. And you don't really have any tax reporting obligations because you're not generating enough. A business, on the other hand, is you're dedicating time to it and you're consistent. You start with the intention of making money. You register your business, you have all your licenses, you keep up with bookkeeping, right? What the two have in common is that, and this is where the confusion lies, is that they both require time and effort, and they both might be a passion, right? But a passion can just be a hobby or it can be a business. So every time I meet with a new client, I'm like, okay, we have to decipher if this is something that you're doing to make money and you can dedicate the time and you're consistent with it versus something you're doing for pleasure. And there's nothing wrong with either one. But if we're doing it for the purpose of it being a business, then we have to be very strategic about it. And we have to be very smart in the way in which we conduct every aspect of that business, in which we plan and so on. So the fashion industry is a for-profit business. This is not nonprofit, it's for-profit, okay? We have to remember that. So every penny counts, every margin dollar is extremely important, and any negotiation you make with your manufacturing partners, with anybody else, it's extremely, extremely detrimental to your business. So remember, it's for-profit, and every single penny you put towards it, you want to make sure you get something in return. So great, you have a business, right? It's not a hobby, you decided it's a business. Now, have you answered all of these questions? So it's who, what, where, why, and how. Okay. Who will manage your business in the US? Who is your competitor, your competition? Who is the target audience in the US? The US is a huge market. You cannot serve the entire market. Who is the target audience? And then we go into what? What is your product? What is your selling proposition? Again, the US market has everything. We have shirts, we have pants. We don't need another product. So if you're bringing a product in, you have to figure out what is the selling proposition? Like what value are you bringing? How is it different? What makes it different, and so on. And then what customer pain point are you trying to solve? Like are you just creating another line of dresses? Great, but we have a lot of them. So how is your line different from what's out there, right? And then where does the brand's target audience shop? You have to also know who you're targeting and where do they shop. Where should you focus your initial entry into the market? Like where are you entering the market? And where can the brand find strategic partnerships in the US, right? Because when you enter the market, you also have to partner with the right entities to create brand awareness, to create some sort of brand DNA and start building that brand loyalty. And then why? Why are you doing this now, right? Is it because you're in a good financial standing? Is it because you can afford it? Is it because you're bored? Why? And why should the customer choose you? Again, there's a lot of competition. Why you? So you have to make sure that you understand or are able to answer, why should the customer choose you? And then why should the customer care? Again, all of these different options available, why should they care about you? And then we answer how. How will you fund it? Do you have money to fund it? How will you enter the US market? And then how are you going to compete? Again, the US market is oversaturated. We have everything. So if you're entering it, you have to figure out what your niche is. So I want to kind of stop here and ask all of you guys, have you answered any of these questions before as you build your business? Anyone?
Come on, don't be shy.
And it's okay if you haven't. For me, it's very important, again, because your time is valuable, your money is valuable. So we want to spend our time and money on things that are really going to generate something, right? That are meaningful. So when you've looked at your business, have you ever answered any of these questions before?
Hi, Cecilia here.
Yes.
Yes, I thought of those questions. I recently been thinking about entering the US market, and I saw when I went there that there is a place called 1000 Villages, which they have many stores, and they sell products from all over the world, but you have to be like certified in different ways to like you cannot say just okay, I am sustainable, like you have to prove it. And I saw many stores that are like that for example you need to be a B Corp, or you need like different for example, if you say that your fabric is sustainable, then it should have like it should be certified. And for example, in swimsuits, uh, in Uruguay, it's very difficult to acquire fabrics that are like that because we don't get access to those fabrics, for example, in our country. So like sourcing is very difficult when you want to be like certified in those ways.
So thank you so much for sharing, Cecilia. I appreciate it. So I completely understand that, but then let's look at it from this perspective. Maybe you're not going to enter the market as a sustainable brand, right? And that would be okay too, but then what is your point of view? What is your selling proposition? Is it because you're very affordable? Is it because you're bringing in a new design that hasn't been done before? Is it because you're servicing maybe the plus size market or the tall market or something else? You just have to have a niche, right? So sustainability might be a niche, but something else might also be a niche. So you kind of have to figure out what is that niche and how are you entering it? Jacinta, I see your.
Yes, sorry. I wanted to add to the part of the swimwear industry that, especially in Miami, it changed pretty fast because we have Cabana, the swim show. Now, actually, they're having another date in October that it's really good for the category. And I will tell you that it is also surprising how fast it changed. Like, for me, 2 years ago, it was about sustainability. Today, the last swim show that we have this year, everyone was looking like the bare minimum for being there was like having UV protection in the fabrics. And you will see, like, hey, this is so overwhelming for my small business. Like, I can't handle all of this. But sometimes it's good like to stop and see what you really have in your business, because we normally tend to miss so many good assets that we have that you can promote. Like, for example, the part that probably you don't have a big factory to produce all that, and here they value that part that one person make it. Like, each one have the details. It's really like it have been for me as a Chilean also like a cultural shock, that part that they love, like the artisan manners that Latin America brings to the table when we present our products. So don't worry about like the technology and the fabrics and all that stuff. Look at maybe that little details that you have inside your organization, that it could be really a good point for you to distinguish in this market.
Exactly. Thank you so much. That's the
Thank you
selling.
both.
Yeah, the selling proposition, and small batches are, like Jacinta said, are seen as almost luxury here, right? Why? Because we
Yes.
also have a market that we are consuming fast fashion at scary rates. Like we love
Yes.
fashion here. So you bring in something that's unique, that's handmade, that's only 50 made per style. You value that because you realize that quality is better, you realize materials are better, and you probably come to the conclusion that it's better for you to consume that way, and it's probably better from a sustainable perspective and environmental perspective. So
Yes.
as long as you have that point of view, you have a reason for being. Like, what
And
is
also,
the reason for being?
sorry.
Yeah.
Also, don't get overwhelmed, because sometimes it's scary when you see these numbers of this huge market and you think you really like can make it. And no worries, like you go step by step. We have clients that they start only making like 10 pieces, and it's fine. And you will find someone. Like, everyone, the good things about the US is that there's always someone for everything. So probably you can find a retailer that suits your conditions too.
Yeah, it's a huge market. As long as you have created a business that has a point of view, that has a selling proposition, like Jacinta says, look at the numbers. We're in the trillions. that we're generating to the GDP, that we're contributing to the GDP from retail, trillions, right? And again, that's entire retail, that's not necessarily fashion, but there's a lot of opportunity in what happens within retail in the US. So as long as you have established a strong rooted business, then the opportunities are there. Any other questions on the slide? Anybody else has kind of tapped into this? Because we also have to do this exercise when we are first creating the brand, right? We're
Yeah.
not creating a brand just because we woke up one day and we say, okay, we're just gonna launch it. Okay, but what was the thought process behind it? Who are you and what are you gonna serve? Who are you gonna serve and why, right?
Yes.
Anyone else would like to comment? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we'll move on. So as you go through this exercise, what you're gonna learn that there's an evolution of ideas from idea to production. So sometimes you're gonna learn that maybe as you go through all of this, that you don't have the strongest selling proposition, that your point of view is not the greatest. So then you're gonna learn to realize that maybe the shape of the product might change. Maybe your material might change. Maybe you decide that your selling proposition in the US is gonna be price point. And if that's the case, then maybe you have to consider a change in the material offering because you're now driving your business through a price point lens versus not. Maybe your offering will change, different markets, different offerings. Maybe the process in which you're doing it might change, the name might change. So as a business owner, you always have to look at it from a perspective of pivoting and changing and kind of till you get to that sweet spot of this is my business and this is what's gonna work, right? But the more you learn about it, the more you're gonna realize that things might have to shift, pivot, till you get to a point where it's an established business that makes sense and that has the right selling proposition for the market that you're entering. So when we're preparing our expansion to the US, these are kind of the things that you have to look at. First of all, is I highly recommend an advisory board. And an advisory board, it's not just people that are going to give you advice, but these are people that are going to build your network. And building your network in the US is key because building your network means someone in your advisory board can introduce you to a buyer. Someone in the advisory board can introduce you to a new manufacturer overseas. Someone in the advisory board can introduce you to a consultant. So your advisory board is extremely important in having you understand the market and your footing in it. The second one is the US leadership. Who is gonna handle or who's gonna lead this expansion into the US? Are you bringing someone from Uruguay? Is it gonna be someone you hire here? Is it gonna be Jacinta? Who is gonna be your US leadership, right? Then you look at it from a legal perspective. How is this going to look from a legal perspective? And we're going to go over it a little bit. And then where are you going to enter in the US? The US is huge. Are you tackling Miami just because of the proximity to Latin America? Are you going to go straight to New York because you think you're offering fashion that's different and unique and you want to go straight there? Are you going to go to the West Coast because, again, maybe the offering that you are providing through your product is more in line with that marketplace? But you have to figure it all out and have an idea because this also dictates the manner in which you enter, the laws and regulations you have to abide to, the taxation system that you are going to be under, and basically the entire investment in terms of what you are putting in and hopefully a better understanding of what that return on investment is going to be like in a 6-month period, a year period, 5-year period, and so on. So this is kind of step one into your preparation through the US market. And I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into it with the next slide. So the first thing we're going to look at is your business structure. Are you going to create an LLC? Are you looking to put forth a partnership? Is this going to be a branch of something that already exists? Is it going to be a franchise? Is it going to be a C Corp, right? So understanding how are you going to enter the US market in terms of a business structure? And through all of this, I don't want to overwhelm you, but through any of these business structures, we can create a pro and cons list, right? What are the pros of it and what are the cons of each of the different business structures? But that's a decision you have to make based on the research you do, based on the financial means that you have, based on how much risk you want to take, because ultimately it's a lot of risk, right? Entering a new market. So are you going to be a little bit more inclined to taking risk, or are you going to be a little bit more tamed and saying, I just want to test it in a different way? The next one is you basically have to apply to incorporate your business in a specific state. You have to establish a registered agent in that state. Now, if it's someone in your leadership, he can be the registered agent, or you can point to someone else. You have to submit all of your documents. You have to register them with the Secretary of State, or if you have many states, multiple states, you have to register with the IRS through an SS4 form. You have to determine nexus and register with state taxing authorities, again, because you pay city taxes and state taxes. And then you have to maintain state-specific taxation and reporting requirements. And for taxation, Jacinta agrees about this more than me.
No.
Just get someone who's very well versed in taxes, because the US taxing system is very complicated.
Yes. O sea, there is one person in this whole country that needs to be your friend, and it's the IRS. Like, you can't mess up with them. There's like when you're starting here, you see a lot of people that have problem with them and they can't enter the country anymore. So it's quite of drastic, all the measurements that they take. But anyway, I know that in this slide especially, it says like it looks kind of complicated to start a company, but it's not that complicated. It's a website, you can see it. Each state have a different one. It have different commissions. I know that for Florida, it's the 12% of the state tax, that it's really attractive for most of Latin America's companies. That is like one of the lowest. And also, well, the IRS, it's not that you need to be afraid. They are super clear with information. You can go online and they have all the documents. They have videos in YouTube for you to learn. It just needs order to don't mess it up.
Because as we said, the cost of a mistake, like Jacinta said, it's significant. And you just don't want to get into their mailing list of people who are considered delinquent, because that's a never-ending story, right?
Yes.
But again, it's not as complicated. When it comes to taxation, you need the right entity to deal with it. And sometimes you're just a creative, you're not the business person. But the one thing you have to learn is you have to get the right people in to help you with the things that you're lacking or the things that you don't understand. Because a business, it's a living and breathing thing. So you have to take care of it in all of these different aspects, right? It's not like you just created this one thing and now you start selling. It's a little bit more involved than that. Now, non-US residents, Jacinta, talk to us about this.
Yes. For all the non-US residents, of course, you can start a company. You will need a person who manage that is in the US. I do that for brands, and there's many people like me that represent this business here. You need to obtain an EN number. This is like kind of your identification number for the company. With this, you get your taxes. And it's really important. It's like the same as the social security number for normal people, like humans. The EN number is for corporations and businesses. You will need to, they will ask you a couple of files necessary for information. It's mostly kind of documents that the company exists, that this is not something illegal, or like that you have a proper business, basically. And of course, they will ask you to show that you are following the federal state taxes requirements, that is having the company there, and that you will pay taxes in one of the states. They will ask you, of course, for an address. What I normally say to everyone is like, in UPS or in FedEx, you can have this PO box that you pay a fee a month, that it depends like between $10 to $30 per month. And you can have this little box in the store and you get an address. In that way, you can get all your mailing shipped there, and that can be used to open a company. Also, you can get, it's ideally that you have a phone number, but with Google Call, with only a Google email, you can get a phone number. So basically, you don't have to pay anyone and you get another way to communicate with you.
So all very important tips, because these, when I spoken to brands that are not in the US, one of the biggest things is, oh, I don't have a mailing address, I don't have a phone number. Luckily, we live in a time where like technology is so available to us, and most of the times free or just little to no money, that again, those should not be barriers, mental barriers of why not you cannot enter a
Yeah.
country.
I always say here in the US, it's really easy to find fast solutions. Like there's always a way. As Latins, normally we are like kind of traumatized that we always have like a stop or something. Here, there's always a way. Like, and maybe you don't know it. As today, we have the amazing ChatGPT that you can literally put your problem and he will give you a solution for what you're looking.
Yeah, yeah. So cannot be afraid. You just have to kind of power forward. Now, golden rules. Go ahead, Jacinta.
Yes. These are 3 golden rules that you really need to follow when you start a business here. Here is to take care of your ongoing responsibilities. Please file the annual reports. Like there's a bunch of apps that help you with the accountability of your business, like QuickBooks, that is like they have plans from $9 a month to $30 a month, and you can track all your accountability there. Also, try to maintain a good like relationship with the state paying the taxes. They offer you also like options to delay the payments or do it per terms or per month. You can decide, but never skip a payment with that. And also keep all your business licenses and permits up to date if you're gonna open a store. I'm not an expert in the food industry, but normally it happens a lot there that it takes a while to get all the certification and the papers for example, a restaurant to open. And it's because they really take the time to look of what you're doing in that place. For fashion, normally you don't need really like a fashion license or permits because as normally you start online, so it's quite easier. But if you want to sell in one point or you carry a product or you have something, always make sure that you have all that papers in a file, if anyone asks, you can have it. Also, well, in the same part of the necessary permits of licenses, you can actually Google them, most of them, depending on the kind of business. And you can also ask in the same page of the government to see if you need a specific permit. For fashion, in my part, they have never asked me basically for anything. I don't know about you, Matula. No, this is more like health or restaurants, kind of like that. But if you do a pop-up, for example, that it have happened to me, and you're giving, I don't know, drinks or whatever, they will ask you for a permission. So make sure that you have it, because it's not that the place will pay for the permit for giving drinks. No, it's like the one who's handling the drinks is the one who it's getting the responsibility that that's allowed.
And also laws and regulations around alcohol in the US tend to be a little strict. So you want to be mindful in terms of how you handle that.
Yes. And the last part, again, the taxes. Please make sure that you really do it. Like, for example, for the state taxes, yeah, as I told you, Florida's 12%. But anyway, if you do a website, for example, in Shopify, you can add to be charged, like to keep that money in another account so they can pay themselves by their own, and you get all the accounting reports from Shopify. Shopify could be linked to QuickBooks. In that way, it's way easier to have your accountability in order. Again, it varies through state, and it's really important to have your taxes clear.
I
And
have a
also,
question.
yeah.
because we must, I believe it that we must be careful to not change the tax imputation center. Because in our country, we only pay taxes from what that we earn in Uruguay, to the money we earn in Uruguay, but in the States is different. They must pay that you all the money that you have in all the world.
Uh,
Do you understand? The
yes.
taxes are different.
Yes, so it depends where it's based the business. For example, I have a boutique in Miami. So
Yeah.
if I have a website and someone from Los Angeles is getting something shipped up there, that person from LA will pay the taxes of Florida. So that money will go there. It tends to happen, and once it happened to me that I was in a store and a person didn't want to pay the taxes because he said that he didn't live in the state, so he was not, he didn't need to pay the taxes. Yeah, they can do that. Like, you need to ask for that amount of taxes, like you can discount it, because if not, you will pay them yourself. And where you consume is where you pay. It's like if I go to Uruguay, I pay the taxes from Uruguay, and if I go
No,
to
no. I want to say something different. Because
si
the
quieres
law,
dilo en
the law.
español.
La ley en Estados Unidos,
Ujú.
lo que pasa es que en Uruguay vos solamente pagás impuestos por tu trabajo en Uruguay o por tus
Perfecto.
ganancias en Uruguay. En Estados Unidos vos pagás impuestos por tus ganancias. No necesariamente tienen que ser en el lugar Estados Unidos. Entonces, cuando constituimos la sociedad, tenemos que tener cuidado en la forma que nos ponemos, porque si no vamos a tener que pagar impuestos en Uruguay, en Estados Unidos por lo que ganamos en Uruguay.
No,
Exacto.
I loopholes. There's many loopholes that you can do. That's why a tax company is very important, but there's loopholes to where you don't pay taxes for earnings out of the country. There's
Out of the
Yes.
state.
there's ways to do it. That's why I say a tax person can help you with that. But there's many people that have those multiple business that, because then you're gonna get double taxed, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
no
Yeah,
business.
yes.
Yeah, so there's ways around, legal ways around it.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, of course, legal.
Yeah. But there's ways
Thank
around
you.
it. Of course, yeah. But again, I think having someone that takes care of taxation in the US is very important. And I think there's also a lot of breaks for smaller businesses that they can help you tap into. So if it's a woman-led business, if there's certain, if you're bringing through something that's ethical, there's ways around it. And also what you
Yes.
want to tap into is the trade agreements that the US might have with different countries, right? So
Yes.
whatever that is in terms of importing and exporting, and that also helps your bottom line and your taxation rate as well. So there's a lot there that you can uncover.
Yes.
Okay, so taxation, we kind of covered it. You find the right lawyer to walk you through the US taxation system, because mistakes are costly and we don't want to get into that. Now, logistics. Let's talk about logistics. This is my favorite. So how are we entering the US market? What does your supply chain look like? Where are you bringing the product from, right? And if this is your supply chain, do you have a backup? We know what happened during the pandemic. Everyone that was dependent with a supply chain overseas in Asia ended up paying triple the amount that they were paying on containers, on 40-foot containers, right? So what is your supply chain backup? Where's the product shipping from? What are the costs associated with importing, duties, taxation? So again, understanding the taxation system and understanding what are the agreements that the US has with certain countries. For example, with Mexico, we have very lenient agreements when it comes to importing because we're trying to facilitate trade as much as possible. What does that look like for Uruguay, and how can you benefit from it? And then who's going to be your logistics company? You also need a logistics company. It's a company that's going to help you through this entire process. I have a client from Spain, and she's a little bit in the higher end price point of the luxury handbag business, but she realized through a logistics company that the money she was going to pay to import the goods here increased her price point up to 30%. So now her handbags are very expensive for the offering, right? So you have to do this math beforehand, before you produce your product, before you create all of this inventory, before you make all of this goods, right? Because like us, inventory ages, and you don't want to just produce product to have it with nowhere to ship it. So understanding the logistics aspect of your business is very important. Have you guys ever heard of the Incoterms? So these are called Incoterms, and it's basically the way, yeah, okay, Patricia, you have, okay. The agreement that you make with whatever business you are going to supply in the US, and you have to be very knowledgeable and pragmatic in the way in which you decide the Incoterms, because again, who's going to agree to pay at what point? What are your Incoterms? Ideally, from a buyer perspective, you want DDP because you want the least amount of money to pay on this goods. From a seller's perspective, you just want to sell X works because you want to be done with it. From the factory, you want the buyer to take care of the rest of the costs, right? So do you meet in the middle? Like, what does that look like? But this is kind of figuring out that supply chain aspect of your business, because without it, you're at a loss. You're calculating your profit margins wrong. You're calculating your cost wrong. You're calculating your entire profit of your business wrong. So Incoterms are very important. I like this other slide too, because it kind of tells you like, where are you responsible, right? So seller to the left, buyer to the right. X works, seller kind of is done with you, washes their hands off, but buyer wants DDP because they literally just want to pick it up and not have to pay much in terms of bringing the product in. In the US, if you're dealing with big box retailers, so Macy's, Bloomingdale's, Neiman Marcus, Saks, they want you to quote landed costs. So they want you to give them costs as they are once they land in the US. So if you're making a shirt and you're telling them it's $5, but then through your shipping, through paying customs, through everything, it's $15, you tell them it's 15 versus 5, because they also want to understand that they're calculating their profit margin correctly, right? So understanding your Incoterms and understanding where the responsibility falls and what that means financially is very important in calculating your entire profit. And then let's talk about workforce. Now, okay, great. You decided your Incoterms, you decided your taxation, you decided your why, how, when, and how. Now,
And the insurance,
right,
to translate.
yeah. So now, workforce. Who are you gonna bring into this new location you're opening? Are you gonna hire local talent? Are you gonna bring people from your home country? What are the state laws that apply to your business? How are you going to determine salary levels? That's when Jacinta mentioned minimum wages. You have to understand what the minimum wages are in the country you're doing business. Are you going to offer paid time off? What are the benefits you're going to offer, right? Because what was one of the challenges we talked about in the US? It was shortage of labor, right? We cannot get good people to work for long periods of time. So these people now are very choosy where they work. So offering a good salary, offering paid time off, offering benefits is going to make you stand out and hopefully get the right talent for your business. So are you going to create an employment policy and procedures book? Are you going to hire local talent? Is management going to be local, or are you bringing management? What are the benefits? And how are we going to attract everybody? If you're bringing people from your own country, visas and immigrations is a very complex subject in the US. So you have to ensure you understand the visa options, any government agreements that may benefit your situation, or anything that applies. Visa options in the US are many, but they're also, it's a process, right? So if you get a O1 visa, if you get an investor visa, what that looks like and what does that mean for your business. So understanding that helps you also make the decision whether management is going to be local or you're going to bring it in, whether the person who is going to be your operations manager is worth getting a visa, or whether you should hire a local operations management. So understand where all of that stands and how that looks like in the big scheme of things is important. And
Yeah.
then just to kind of wrap it up, the keys to success, you have to research, and do your due diligence. Again, we are so lucky that we live in the age we live in. Everything is in our fingertips. Like Jacinta said, ChatGPT, Google, we can literally research anything. So if you want to figure it out, you can, and it's very easy. So you can research US advisors or counselors to kind of help you navigate the environment. The advisory board, as I said, ensure you have resources to dedicate to the expansion. The US is a great market with a great potential. It's also an expensive market. Do we have the funds to expand in the US? That's why I say, why now? One of the questions. And you ensure you have a strategic plan and you're able to pivot and change if things change. The economy can change, the political environment can change. Right now in the US, we are anticipating elections, right? What is that going to look like for our country? What is that going to do to the economy, right? Have a plan, have an idea, and be able to kind of pivot through it. And most importantly, focus on the consumer, right? You're entering this market because you're providing something to this target audience that you think are going to benefit from what you're offering. So focus on the consumer, and how do you ensure that you are doing just by them and you're doing right by them and you're providing something that's needed. So with that, I kind of like to end it right at 3:59, so right on time. Again, this was the first session, more of a top level overview. I like the other sessions because we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about margin. We're going to do math. We're going to talk about kind of inventory. We're going to talk about pricing and how do we price our product. So those are, I think, a little bit more interactive as subjects. This is a little bit more passive, where this is the information, we can change it. But with the other ones, where I hope we have more to talk about, and we're more engaged. So I'll open it up for questions now, and we'll take it from there. Anybody have any questions? No questions.
No questions?
Okay. Okay. Are you all
Everything
business
was
owners
clear.
currently?
Hi,
Hi.
this is Antonella. It's really noisy where I am now. That's why I'm
Okay.
muted, but I think it was really useful, all what you've been explaining to us, and I hope to hear more.
Great. Thank you, Antonella, for your feedback.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe in the next sessions we are going to talk about that. Maybe I'm getting ahead of that. But
Yeah.
when you talked about the kinds of companies like LLC and so on, which is like the entry one? Is it the LLC for what I heard, or
So it depends what you're trying to achieve, how much risk you want to take, and what your tax cuts and breaks are going to look like. So I don't think I can recommend one. I think you kind of have to review your business model and figure out what might be the right one for you. In the US, people that live in the US usually do go the route of the LLC or an S corp, but those are US citizens. But again, it depends and kind of what you're trying to seek. I could have done an overview of each of them, but I thought it was too much information, and maybe I should have. I'll take a note of that to review it a little bit further, but I think it's more of a business decision that the business owner has to make.
thank you.
Yes. I would like to add that there's no like general recipe for this. Every brand have a different journey. There's a lot of points that are like sharing common, but everyone is completely different because you have different goals, you have most of the time different products, or you are reaching to other audiences. And so it will depend a lot, and you will see in the following sessions like which journey is better to take for each of you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, so you have my contact information. We're gonna do the next session. The time, sorry for the time change this time around, but we're gonna go back to our regular timing. Again, an hour session. And in the meantime, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. And if not, we'll see you next time.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Have a
Thank you, Matilda.
bye,
Thank
of course.
See
you.
you
Bye
next
bye.
Thursday.
Bye
Next Thursday.
bye. Thank you.
Chao. Si quieren comentar cosas luego para la próxima sesión, mandan, ¿tá? Si después surgen consultas
Bien,
o cosas para trabajar.
buenísimo, muchas gracias.
Chao, chao. Goodbye.
Chao.